Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Wolves Fancast YouTube channel for a new episode of my tactical analysis. Going to be covering the three games in the last week that we've had. It has been a while since I've been on with you to kind of talk through some of the tactical aspects of games. But I think the last week has kind of given us some new things to think about with the absence of Mateus Cunha. Obviously, must have kind of given him a bit of a bad luck charm by doing an in-depth look at his game in my last video, and obviously we've been absent. He's been absent with injury since then. So looking specifically at Sheffield United, Brighton, and Newcastle, how we've come up with different plans to try and cope without Mateus, who I think we can safely say is probably our most important player. I did make this point prior to this as well, but I think it's evident now, given that certain performance levels have dropped slightly, I think, in the last few weeks. But also just having to come up with different solutions rather than just going like for like with anybody just coming in to his place in the team. To start with, we'll obviously kick off at the start of this week in inverted commas and the win against Sheffield United. Now, Hwang was fortunately back. So fortunately, he's obviously now missing for us, but was available to come in with Cunha dropping out of the team and fill another one of those forward line positions. But I think it was interesting, as you can see from the average positions in this positions map, how Gary O'Neill altered specifically the left side of the team to try and come up with a different solution. Sheffield United obviously featuring a back five, generally speaking. And this kind of played out for me in this way, in terms of in possession. You had Ryan Nuri tucking in as one of the kind of newfangled inverted fullbacks, allowing Mario Lemina to push on. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about Lemina and how he's kind of taken on a new role in recent weeks. But also having Neto as very much a left wing presence in this game to get down the line and try and get crosses into the box. He did add a bit of a remit to travel with the ball inside once he got it. But yeah, I think this was O'Neill's answer to obviously losing what Cunha gives us down that left hand side of the pitch, and to think about it in the way that we've almost altered the roles of three different players in order to try and combat that. It just goes to show how important he is to the way we play. A bit more kind of conventional without a possession. Obviously, Nuri filtering back out wide. Lemina drops into his natural place in midfield, and Neto tucking in quite narrow as well there. But this couple of screenshots here just kind of show you what I mean. Lemina kind of pushing onto the last line here. Ran receiving the ball deep as almost a sitting midfielder there from Totti. And Totti also had a bit of a license to overlap from that kind of hybrid position he plays. And Neto very much kind of a touchline winger in this one. Similar kind of positioning again there. And obviously we won the game. We highlight exactly where these players had their touches. Lemina very much box to box, getting on the end of things. Had a couple of attempts at goal in this one. Ryan Nuri was obviously the assist provider for Pablo Sarabia, cutting in on his right foot, which is kind of an alien concept to us Wolves fans. And Neto, heavy amount of touches down that left-hand side. I think with Neto, I would prefer to kind of play him against whoever the weakest defender is within a team's defensive line. We saw against Newcastle, he was up against Dan Burn, which he obviously came off at half time, but he looked like he had a little bit of joy in that game. This game against Sheffield United, he came up against Anel Ahmedhodzic, who, of the three Sheffield United defenders within the starting lineup that day, is definitely the quickest. And he showed that on a few occasions when Neto was trying to break into open space behind him. Ahmedhodzic actually dealt with him very, very well. Wasn't the most convincing performance as well, but we got the job done. And again, clean sheet. You can't really sniff at stuff like that. So moving on into the midweek game, the FA Cup fixture against Brighton. And again, I'm going to kick off with the average positions of the team. Much more kind of conventional. There were obviously changes to the lineup in this one. Pedro Neto dropped out for Bellegarde to come in, and Sarabia dropped out for Lemina to come in. Doherty as well coming in on the right-hand side. And Ryan Nuri playing a much more kind of conventional wing-back position on this one, was very much asked to stay wide on the touchline when in possession for sure. And I think Lamina was obviously the key to this game. He actually posted on his social media winger vibe as part of his kind of celebratory post after scoring the winner in this one. So I think it's fair to say that he basically took the position of one of the forwards in this game, and that was what he was tasked with. You can see he's managed to have 3 attempts at goal on his touch map here. One obviously being the winner within a couple of minutes of the start of the game, and this kind of ability for him to crash into the box because of his physical profile, because he has the capacity to do the legwork as well. It's a reinvention of what we've seen Mario Lemina as, but it goes to show the skill set that he provides us and the variety of roles that he can perform because of that skill set is really invaluable to us, and shows what a talent he is, and perhaps has blossomed late into a very complete midfielder. I think he's on for his best goal scoring season already, with the opportunity to score more. But just to highlight again, when Cunha was out of the team, he wasn't necessarily needed to be involved in the play towards the top end of the pitch. You can see though in the last few games the amount of touches as a percentage that he's getting in the attacking third has increased kind of exponentially. The one exception to that was Man United, which for the most part we're obviously chasing the result in that one. We're behind in the game, and again he is obviously being tasked with the responsibility for getting into the box and scoring goals and making things happen. So real leader for us. So game state obviously affects how Gary O'Neill wants Lamina to play as well. And he's really kind of stepped up to the mark and helped us pick up some points in the absence of what is now going to be obviously the entire forward line, basically. So again, something to keep an eye on as we go into a period without Huang and Cunha and Neto with slightly sketchy fitness at the moment. Seems to be getting taken out of the firing line a couple of times in order to protect him, probably. But we'll see how we approach that against Fulham. And the final game I wanted to touch on, obviously, was Newcastle this weekend. 3-0 defeat. For me, not reflective of the way the game went. And I wanted to kind of touch on a quote from Gary O'Neill after the game where he said that there's no way Newcastle let us have a lot of the ball. I know Newcastle. I know Eddie Howe. The reason we had the ball was because of how good we were on it. And I wanted to kind of see if there was a semblance of truth in this. I've watched the first half. I haven't gone back into the second because I don't think I needed to go any further than that. But I think he had a point, to be honest. We, up until probably the 33rd minute, had the better of the game, which is the point at which I scored the second goal. I think there was a comment from Eddie Howe about how Newcastle altered their approach slightly, but I think they could do that from the point in which they scored. Before that, the body language of the players, the reaction of the crowd did not suggest that they were comfortable with the way the game was going. And Wolves had lots of possession in really kind of promising areas of the pitch. Just to kind of touch on again the average positions, a bit more back to our usual way with a kind of a more fluid front three. Lamina and Tommy Doyle were obviously the midfield pairing, and Ryan Aitner supporting that as well. And we actually, especially compared to Newcastle, had much more possession in the more dangerous parts of the field, basically. I've highlighted that kind of square alongside each other there for the first 33 minutes. And if you just look at the numbers of touches that each player was having as well on either side of that touch map, you can see that the more influential players from our perspective were getting on the ball more, and quite simply the Newcastle players weren't. Tommy Doyle having twice as many touches as Bruno Guimaraes is a bit of an indicator as to how the game was going. Alexander Isak not really getting much involvement, and really the downfall of the team was just probably. I think this can happen when you're getting joy in a game. You think, you know what, maybe we can push on a little bit. We can try and press them into mistakes. And I think partially because we didn't have a natural forward on the pitch as well. Pressing high means you have to work less hard once you win the ball back to obviously create a chance. I think there was an encouragement within the group, within themselves, maybe not from Gary O'Neill, but when you feel as a player like you've got the bit between your teeth and you feel confident within a game, you are naturally going to try and press hard and think, you know what, we can nick the ball here in order to make something happen. And we got caught out a little bit on two occasions, which obviously led to the first two goals within the game. The first one, I think that the main issue for me was once the ball was lost, we're in a situation where we're kind of 1v1 basically, with Gordon running at Max Kilman, Craig Dawson managing Alexander Isak, and Totti Gomez obviously sprinting back. And Bruno Guimaraes is the guy who actually breaks forward from midfield to get on the end of the Gordon pass to have the shot that ends up being deflected for Isak. And Gomez, for me, makes an odd decision here. Now, Dawson's obviously deep because he's had trouble with Isak in the past in terms of his movement, in terms of his pace. So I think he wants to allow himself the opportunity to, if Isak gets the ball, set himself, defend the situation properly, rather than necessarily getting tight, blocking the run, all those kind of things, because there's too much space in that half of the pitch to really allow him to defend really tight. Gomez, for me, just needs to simply track Bruno's run. He's ahead of him in the first screenshot, and he's actually been attracted too much to Isak to the extent that Dawson ends up getting caught in no man's land, basically. He's obviously preoccupied with him as well. Gomez, his natural eye line takes him towards Isak to try and support Dawson. And by the time he actually gets back to him, Dawson is engaged to try and block the shot, but he's nowhere near close enough to really impact it in a properly positive way. The deflection is unfortunate in the way it lands, but also a result of just nobody being able to get close enough to Guimaraes, which was the major problem there. And unfortunately for us, it landed right on Isak's head. And the second goal for me, again, you can see because we've had joy in the game, we've gone kind of man-to-man in this scenario. The only three players from a Newcastle perspective that you would suggest had time and space were Kieran Trippier, who's out of shot, with Ait Nouri kind of ready to go and press him. Jacob Murphy out on the touchline here with Gomez, Totti Gomez again, available to go and press, not in a threatening part of the pitch, and a difficult pass to play if he is to receive the ball. And then there's Joe Willock, who has floated in behind the midfield. Obviously, they have that overload in midfield in terms of a three-man midfield versus the two that we've got. And Dawson, for me, again, partially, I think, because of his preoccupation with Isak and having trouble with him in the past, isn't in any kind of vicinity to try and get close to Willock. With everybody else man-to-man, I think he should see this happen. The ball comes across from Botman to Shaw, and in the time that the ball gets across to Shaw, you should be able to see Willock finding that space and then get closer to him. By the time Dawson realises he needs to, it's too late. Shaw plays a really nice pass, to be fair to him, but he's good on the ball. He can do that kind of stuff. And Willock picks up the ball, able to turn, and then he feeds Jacob Murphy, who crosses the ball in and causes havoc in our penalty area. So I think, just a couple of small lapses in a game where we were having joy as well. Just really disappointing for us to kind of work so hard for our chances. Obviously, personnel issues are massive on that front for us, but for it to be so easy for Newcastle to be able to get into a lead like that, and then we're kind of dead. And the second half was a bit of a see what we can get hold of. Obviously, protecting Neto with the substitution. I think ultimately, if you was to say at the start of the week, we won 2 out of 3 of those games. We lost Twang at probably the literal halfway point within those 3 fixtures as well, and we're in an FA Cup quarter-final by the end of it. I think you'd have probably taken that in terms of the results and the way they've gone. If you had to pick a game to lose, it probably was the Newcastle game to a certain extent. We don't like to think like that, obviously. We like to try and pick up as many points as we can. And I do think Newcastle was a game where a result was there for us. I would have probably personally started a little bit more circumspect with the way the team was set up. Keep a clean sheet as long as possible. I think there's not an obvious amount of goals in that team without like Cunha and Hwang in the front line. So take the game long. Perhaps I would say start someone like Matt Doherty as the left wing back, as an example. Just be a bit more robust, able to deal with a more physical kind of forward line of Newcastle's, where they've got a bit of height, they've got a bit of a set piece threat as well, and then bring on the quality in the team to try and nick something towards the end of the game. But look, it was arguably the most enjoyable performance, I would say, in many aspects in terms of in possession. We looked good, we looked tidy, but then the least enjoyable, obviously, from the way we conceded the goals. And the third, I just don't want to touch on. It almost made me feel physically sick with some of the defending for that one. But we move on. Fulham's going to be another big game for us, and then obviously an FA Cup quarter final on the horizon, which likely to be without our two main goal scorers, two main front men, and we'll need to come up with another solution to beat a team who I think will prove tricky opposition for us in Coventry. But hopefully, another trip to Wembley to look forward to. So look forward to speaking to you soon.